My name is Anne Hawkins and I'm the Copyright and Open Access Coordinator at the University of Adelaide Library. So questions are very welcome during this session. So we have the chat option available, and if you'd like to ask a question anonymously, you can do so through the Q&A. And of course, we'll be recording today's session and making it available on our website, so you can always come back and revisit anything that we cover later. So I think everybody knows that copyright exists, and if you're watching this, you probably don't need to be convinced that you need to know something about it. Obviously, all staff are required to comply with the law, but I'd argue that it's also an opportunity to model good practices to your students, and that knowing how to appropriately use copyright material is an important digital literacy skill that all of our graduates should be taking with them into the workplace. So depending on your age, you might have this anti-piracy ad burned into your brain. So it equated downloading movies to stealing cars and bags, and was forced viewing at the cinema and at the start of DVDs. Unfortunately, copyright is a bit more complex than just illegally downloading movies, and it has the potential to affect teaching quite broadly. So to start with, I'm just going to give a very brief overview of the type of material and uses which are controlled by copyright. So copyright covers a wide range of material. Basically, anything which is written down, made or recorded is likely to be protected. So the Copyright Act defines 8 categories of material, but really you just need to know that almost everything is copyright, including books, articles, artworks, music, poems and videos. Something to keep in mind is that the bar for protection is very low. So a graph or a table is classed as a copyright artistic work, same as a masterpiece painting, and a cat video that you might take on your phone is classed as a copyright film, same as a Hollywood blockbuster. So copyright owners are given exclusive rights, which allow them to control certain uses of material. Oh, sorry. Across certain uses of material. The right to make copies is most obviously is a copyright right. But copyright owners also have the right to adapt the material, publish and publicly perform the material, and to make the material available online. So for example, music playing in the uni bar is considered a public performance, and a report uploaded to the university website would include the right to copy and make available online. And if it was the first time the report was made public, then it would also involve the publication right. As mentioned, these rights are controlled by the copyright owner. Without going into too many details, the first owner is usually the creator of the material or the creator's employer. But for the purpose of this session, when I'm referring to using copyright material, I'm talking about third-party copyright material. So this is basically any material where the university isn't the copyright owner. So if it's something you or another university staff member created for teaching, as a part of your employment, then the copyright should belong to the university and you can use it. However, if it's something created by a third party, for example, a commercially published textbook, a television documentary or a picture you found on a website, then the following information applies. So to go back to the anti-piracy ad, I'm sure you wouldn't steal a car, television or illegally download a movie. However, would you share an article with your students, play a video in class, or use a picture in a PowerPoint? And the answer to all of those is probably yes. And you now know that all of those materials are protected by copyright, and all of those uses are protected rights. So you might be concerned that you're infringing copyright on a regular basis, but I want to say, don't panic. There are lots of ways you can use material without infringing copyright. So to start with, the Copyright Act contains a range of exceptions which allow users to use material for certain purposes. The main ones which are relevant to teaching are that you can perform material in class. So this includes, playing music, performing a play, screening a film. You can also include material in an exam. So this covers using material for both questions and answers. And the Act also contains something called the statutory licenses. These allow the university to copy and make available online text and artistic works. So things like your book chapters and your diagrams from textbooks, things like that. It also covers broadcasts, which are radio and television programs. Basically, we just have to pay equitable remuneration to the copyright owners, which we do by having licenses in place with the collecting societies. Second, you can use material under the terms of a license if it has one. So this includes open licenses such as Creative Commons and commercial licenses such as the music license, which the university has in place with the music collecting societies in Australia. And thirdly, if you can't rely on an exception or license, then you can ask for permission from the copyright owner. I'm not going to go into details about this today, but your success with asking permission can depend on the material you want to use. For example, if the copyright owner is a fellow academic, which you can contact, you're obviously more likely to have success than if you want to use some Hollywood movie. And finally, my personal favourite way that you can legally use copyright material is to use it in a way that doesn't actually use any of the copyright rights. So basically, I'm talking about providing students with links to the material or embedding it rather than making a copy. But I'm going to talk about this a little bit more later. So hopefully you'll be pleased to know that we don't expect you to keep a list of all the ways you can use material in your head. So the university introduced a revised copyright policy in the middle of this year, which it's understandable if you weren't aware of that because of certain other events were going on, but we're trying to really promote it now. So the policy includes a new procedure for using third-party copyright material in teaching, and this covers what your responsibilities are as staff, how you can provide material to your students online, what you can include in lecture recordings, supplying physical copies to students, and also how material can be used in non-award courses such as micro-credentials. So the procedure is designed to be a resource which you can refer to throughout your teaching. So I'm not going to just go through and repeat everything that the procedure says here. Instead, I'm going to concentrate on how you can make material available to your students online, as I think this is the most common issue, and this year in particular, it's been brought to the fore. So to start with, you probably all know that MyUni is the university's designated learning management system. But did you know that you can't actually upload copyright material directly on it unless you can rely on an open license, have permission from the copyright owner, or can rely on an exception? And this is where it gets even more tricky because the material which is copied under one of the educational statutory licenses or the music license is actually required to be managed via course readings. And I'm going to talk about course readings a bit later. So to start with, I'm just going to quickly go over open license material and linking. But before I move on to that, I just want to emphasise that other online platforms or tools should not be used to distribute copyright material to students. So I'm talking about platforms such as Microsoft Teams and Google Docs and things like that. You really need to stick to the central university designated systems. So the policy requests that open license material be used where possible. So an open license grants users the right to use material in certain ways without needing to ask for permission, or you don't have to rely on an exception either. So this material is preferred in the policy, and it's because it can be used broadly. As long as you follow the license conditions, you can upload material directly in MyUni, you can include it in lecture recordings, and potentially you can use it in much more creative ways, such as including it in an interactive or setting some class assignment where people could, add music to a Creative Commons licensed video or something like that. I'm not actually going to go into detail here about open licenses because there is a whole Library Bites session that we did on open educational resources a couple of months ago. So you can watch that if you're interested. We also have a library guide to help you get started on finding openly licensed material. I mentioned earlier that one of my favourite ways to use copyright material is to simply provide students with a link. So this is a great option if the material is freely available online and you want students to, access it independently. Since you're not actually making a copy, you don't need to worry about if you can rely on an exception or license. The only thing you need to be careful about is to avoid directing students to infringing material, as you can be liable for authorising the infringement. So by this, I'm referring to material which has been made available online without the copyright owner's consent. You don't need to do a thorough investigation, but I'm basically saying steer clear of things which are obviously infringing, such as, a movie which has been made available on some random person's YouTube channel, or an entire commercially published textbook which doesn't have an open license and, hasn't been made available by the publisher, but it's just on some random website. Steer clear to things like that. Similar to linking, it's also fine to embed material directly in MyUni if the site or platform where the material is sitting on makes this option available. So by embedding, I mean, that's where, you add a bit of code to the HTML of the page and the material appears as if it's in the page in MyUni, but it's actually still sitting on the original site. So a good example is YouTube videos generally get embedded in MyUni, even though, they're actually linking through to YouTube still. So with a link, students can't actually see the material unless they go to the original site. Hopefully that makes sense. If you have any questions about that, then you can contact me or probably even the MyUni support team, know much more about linking and embedding. So there are obviously times when you're not going to be able to use openly licensed material or link to freely available material. And for this, there is course readings. So course readings is the designated central system to manage copyright material. And it may seem counterintuitive saying that you can't generally upload copyright material to MyUni, because obviously that's where you're interacting with your students. That's where your lectures are, the quizzes are, all your other teaching material are. But the good news is that course readings is actually in every MyUni course already. And it integrates basically MyUni with the library. So for students, it's actually a seamless experience. As mentioned previously, you are required to use course readings for statutory and music license content. So with statutory license content, the main most common examples are if you want to, scan and upload a book chapter or a journal article, that would be covered by the statutory license. It also covers copies of radio and television programs. And in relation to the music license, I'm referring to copies of music sound recordings. The license is actually much broader than that, but just in relation to course readings, I'm just worried about the sound recordings side of things. However, course readings is much more than copies of book chapters. It's integrated with library search. So that means you can easily add resources such as, streaming videos, ebooks, articles, anything that we have available through the library, you can add to your course readings list. You can also use it to link to external sites. And you can also upload material that you might want to use and are a little bit unsure of. So the best thing is if you put it in course readings, basically the library will manage the copyright for you. So if you have something that you're a little bit unsure about, if you put it in course readings, the library will, one, tell you if you can use it or not, and the best way that we can provide access to students. So basically, if in doubt, please use course readings. And finally, I quickly want to touch on artworks. So after telling you that statutory license content is required to be managed by course readings, I'm now going to turn around and say that this doesn't always apply to artworks. So if you're using images for decorative purposes, like say in a PowerPoint slide, then the policy actually requires you to use openly licensed images. So this presentation now is a really good example of that. Basically, I've used images throughout, but they're not really necessary. So you can see that all of the images that I've used have a Creative Commons license. If you require images for educational purposes, so for example, you're teaching medicine and there isn't an openly licensed anatomy image that you have to use, then you can rely on the statutory license. But you just need to make sure that you comply with the conditions of the license. So we've got those on the copyright website. So I'd recommend going there for details, but we don't require these images to be managed via course readings. So, you can put them in your PowerPoint and upload directly to MyUni. Regardless of if you're using an image under an exception, license, statutory license, no matter, why you're using it, I would ask you to please always provide an attribution. So this is obviously an important academic integrity principle. It's an opportunity to model good practice to your students. It's also important that we can identify where these images have come from for auditing purposes. And it's something that obviously people always do with like text-based works, but sometimes with images, they can get a little bit sloppier with. So it's something I would recommend doing even for images which come from sites which don't say you require attribution, which say they don't require attribution, like sites like Unsplash and Pixabay, if you're familiar with those. But I'd still recommend doing it just because it's good practice to get into. So that's really it today. It was really, a very super fast overview of some things to keep in mind. So thank you for joining me. I hope you've learned something useful. Don't forget, we'll have the recording of this and our other Library Bites for Teaching videos available on our websites. If you have any questions now, please, type them into the chat box or the Q&A and I will stick around and answer them, or else you can contact us using the details on the screen. So yes. And I will just have that awkward silence while I wait to see if anybody has any questions. But obviously you don't have to stay if you don't want to. Okay. Yes. So it doesn't look like anybody has any questions. So I'm going to end the session now. So I hope everybody has a great day, but feel free to, contact us later if you have any questions. Okay. Thank you. Bye.